men are noble, for nature has secreted in everything an occult seed which lends a certain power and property to whatever derives from it and makes it resemble it, as we see not only in the breeding of horses and other animals, but also in trees, whose shoots almost always resemble their stock, and if sometimes they degenerate, it is because they have been badly cultivated. But this argument is at once challenged. This nobility does not seem to me so necessary, a voice protests. Gaspare Pallavicino is a young man who, for reasons of his own, recognizes no ancestor but Adam, and in the spirit of the new age he protests such feudal ideas. I could name many who, born of the best blood, have been vicious, and others who, despite their low birth, have ennobled their posterity by their virtues. If it were true, as you say, that everything reveals the occult virtue of the original seed, we should all be alike, as we all have the same origin, and no man would be better than the next. Nature knows none of these subtle distinctions, and as this nobility is acquired neither by ability, nor power, nor art, it is rather to the credit of our ancestors than to our own. And it seems to me altogether unfair to say that if the parents of the courtier are lowly, all his other qualities count for nothing. Canossa is chagrined that his open-mindedness should not be recognized. It is one of his best qualities, and he has been at pains to acquire it, but it counts for nothing with the new generation. He is of an excitable nature, but he is unwilling to appear reactionary, and he compromises between the feudal and the Renaissance views of the value of blood. Maintaining that birth constitutes an initial advantage, but conceding merit and talent as titles to social recognition, he opens his vocation to the natural gentleman and sustains the liberal tradition of Italian aristocracy and the Renaissance cult of reason and humanity, which tempers even the conservative tenets of class pride, submitting them to discussion, defending them on rational, and opposing them on generous grounds, to the enlightening influence of a new birth. But he has the instinct of privilege, and he now claims a natural one, beauty. I would have our courtier well favored, and he should be born not only with beauty and ability, but also with a certain grace and, as we say, a blood which will make him at first sight and to everyone pleasing and welcome. Birth, beauty, ability, and charm. Why should he not be exorbitant? When he is temperate, he is immediately misjudged, but no one demurs. The aesthetic sense of the age accepts these claims without question. His next point also meets with general consent. I believe that the principal and true profession of the courtier should be arms, though of course only as an amateur. I should not expect him to show so complete a command of military affairs as a captain must possess. This would be to wade in too deep, and we shall be satisfied with an undaunted spirit and integrity of faith, which he must manifest on every occasion, for courage is more often recognized in small than in great things. Often in major perils, where there are many witnesses, we find men who, though their hearts weigh like lead, are spurred on by shame or companionship and push forward blindly, doing their duty God knows how, while in less tight corners, where they can avoid danger without dishonor, they willingly look to their safety. But those that, even when they expect neither to be seen nor recognized, show spirit and shirk nothing, however slight, that might tax them, these have that virtue of soul we seek in our courtier. And one thing more, the soldier we seek should be fierce, harsh, and always among the foremost before the enemy, but everywhere else modest, reserved, and humane, avoiding above everything ostentation and insolent self-praise, which always arouse distaste and aversion. This leads to a larger question. Pallavicino objects that he has found few who are not given to self-praise if they are proficient in anything, and for his part he is willing to condone so human and democratic a failing, because a man who knows his own worth, when the ignorant do not recognize it, is bound to be irked if his talent is buried, and he is compelled to disclose it or be defrauded of honor. which is the true reward of all virtuous exertions. Suddenly the discussion has fallen on a pregnant theme, on the great craze of the age, its passion for fame, its unblushing cult of celebrity, its inordinate appetite for praise, the meed of all virtue, the motive of all effort, vanity. Vanity. It is vanity in all its forms and under all its pseudonyms, glory, honor, learning, virtue, that makes the world go round. Vanity that distinguishes man from the animal. Vanity that is his sixth sense, and of all the most lustful and insatiable. And if its satisfaction is the accepted object of virtue, why expect men to be superior to it? But there is a way of civilizing vanity, to admit and smile at it, and Bibiena illustrates. The facetious prelate captures the conversation as it threatens to founder beyond its depth, and steers it lightly back into the shallows. I remember that you said our courtier should be gifted with beauty of person and feature, he begins swimmingly. Now, I believe that I am blessed both with grace and beauty of feature, that being the reason, as you know, that so many ladies pine for me. But I am in some doubt as to the beauty of my person, above all of these legs, which, to tell the truth, are not as well turned as they might be, though I am very well satisfied with the bust and the rest of me. I wish, therefore, that you would define this beauty a little more minutely, so that I may resolve my doubts and rest my soul in peace. A ripple of laughter rewards his self-immolation, and with the distant look of a masterpiece among sightseers, he submits body and soul to public scrutiny. Certainly, Canossa agrees, certainly you may truthfully claim beauty of feature, and I need no other illustration to define it. Your appearance, we agree, is exceedingly pleasing. It delights us all. The lineaments are not very delicate, nevertheless, it is gracious and manly enough. And of such would I have the countenance of a courtier. Not so soft and womanish as that of many who curl their hair and pluck their brows and sleek themselves with every trick that the most wanton and disreputable women use. These should be banished, not only from the courts of every great prince, but from the commerce of gentlemen. Then, like an expeditious guide, he returns from the successful diversion which Bibiena has created to his subject, and, to take the taste of effeminacy out of his mouth, rehearses the sports of the courtier. Sports which are not only training for war, but the civilized substitute for it, and he urges his countrymen to excel first in their own sports, secondly, in those of the French, thirdly, in those of the Spanish, and in all, to display that native grace, which, in this as in everything else, is the crown and criterion of strength. Grace. It seems to me, Cesare Gonzaga remarks, that you place it everywhere as a condiment, without which all the other properties and qualities are of little value. And he asks, a little self-consciously, whether, if it is not inborn, it can be acquired. He is near enough to the awkward age to listen for the verdict with a long face and a beating heart. I should not undertake to impart this perfection, Canossa replies, particularly as I said a moment ago that the courtier should wrestle and vault and do many other things which I cannot teach, nor knowing them myself, but which I know you have all mastered. Nevertheless, having often reflected whence this grace arises, I find one rule that is universal, that is to avoid, as far as possible, and as a most fatal and destructive reef, affectation. And if I may employ what is perhaps a new word, to use everything in a certain carelessness which conceals art, and makes what is said and done seem to come without effort, and almost without thought. Therefore, we may say, that is true art which does not seem to be so, and to nothing should we bend our study more than to conceal it. In painting, a single stroke of the brush drawn easily so that the hand seems to travel without apparent calculation or art in obedience to the painter's design clearly discloses the mastery of the artist. And so it is in all other things. A a condiment, did Cesare Gonzaga call it? It is the very marrow of the matter. There is nothing which that seasoning essence does not affect. Facility, the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace, informs the whole creed of the courtier. It is his final sophistication. The mastery of life, or, what amounts to the same thing, the illusion of its mastery, lies in living it gracefully. To preserve the consummate carelessness, the becoming detachment of an amateur, to forfeit anything but that serene appreciation of the vanity of life and that handsome dissimulation of its difficulty, which are the secret of moral elegance, to deprecate whatever is too studied, strained, intense, or earnest, conviction, ambition, passion, success. These habits mark the seasoned mind and distinguish the well-born soul. Or, as a disciple of the courtier put it, un honnête homme ne se pique de rien. So far, the development of the courtier has followed the fashion of his class in all countries, but now the Italian ideal begins to emerge. As grace is the outcome of balance, physical accomplishments must be matched with moral and mental ones to produce that versatility of the universal man, which is indispensable to normal life in general and to social success in particular. As for moral grace, I believe that the only true moral philosopher is the man who tries to be good, says Canossa, settling the question with summary ease, and he needs few other precepts but the will to be so. But besides goodness, our true and spiritual grace I believe to be letters, though the French recognize nobility only in arms and think nothing of all the rest. Indeed, they not only do not appreciate letters, they detest them and hold all lettered men in abject contempt. And they think it the worst affront in the world to call one a clerk. You are right. This error has long reigned among the French. Giuliano de' Medici agrees, though he hopes for an exception in François de Valois. A shadow of patriotic pain comes over the company as Canossa resumes. To say this to you is superfluous. I know that you all understand how mistaken the French are in thinking the pursuit of letters detrimental to that of arms. You know that the true incentive of great and hazardous action in war is glory. The man who makes war for gain or any other motive not only achieves nothing, but does not deserve the name of a gentleman. He is no better than a shopkeeper. What soul is so humble, timid, or sluggish that, reading of the greatness of Caesar, Alexander, Scipio, Hannibal, and so many more, he is not inflamed by a burning desire to emulate them and will not risk this fleeting life of 2 days for a fame that is well nigh perpetual? But unless a man know the charm of letters, he measures fame by the span of 1 or 2 generations, since his memory goes no farther. And he cannot value that brief span so highly as the other, which is well nigh perpetual. And valuing it less, he will probably risk less for renown than a man who is enlightened. But Canossa is only half convinced by his own argument. In reality, he is pleading, and he grows pensive, and the shadow deepens. I would not have some opponent, to refute this opinion, adduce the contrary effects, and say that we Italians, with our cult of letters, have for some time past shown little valor in arms, which is only too true. But we may honestly say that the fault of a few has been the cause of great ruin and shame everlasting to the rest of us, and the true cause of our ruin, and of the decay, if not the death, of virtue in our souls, lies with them. And it would be far more disgraceful for us to publish this than for the French to misjudge letters. It is better to pass over in silence what we cannot recall without pain, and leaving this subject on which I have entered unwillingly, to return to our courtier, whom I would have more than commonly learned, especially in those studies we call the humanities. Shadowy under its mop of black hair, livid under its glowing black eyes, the face of Canossa holds for a moment the mortified pride of his race. The company watches him in tacit agreement. Then he leads them into happier pastures. The culture of the courtier, of course, must be Catholic and classical. But as a philological patriot, Canossa champions the colloquial tongue. It is the living speech that forms style, good writing being but the graphic form of good conversation. Next, there is music. Music, his hobby. And he is about to mount it when a voice growing restless in utopia interrupts. But in all the wide world, no vessel so vast could be found to hold all you would have in your courtier. Wait a little, smiles the Count, for much more is to follow. This is his answer to hecklers, his Italian retort to the gallery. He smiles, but his eyes are still big with their patriotic vision, and his face is still drawn with suppressed feeling. And it is all he can do to speak calmly of music. He would rather keep silence, and with a tense effort he contains himself, remarking merely that, rightly considered, there is no repose from fatigue, no balm for an ailing mind, more honest in idleness, nor more laudable than this. But this is to say nothing. What music means to him, and how eloquent he can be on this theme, everyone knows, and to draw him out, Pallavicino pricks him. There are prigs in virility as in other things, and the young man plays the part of one. Yes, he says, music, I have no doubt, like many another vanity, is fit for women and maybe for some who pass for men, but not for men indeed. They should not emasculate their minds with delights that may lead them to dread death. But he gets no further. Never say it, cries Canossa, bridling with indignation, and his black eyes flame and his black beard bristles. Never say it, he protests with peremptory pain and catches his breath. Never say it. And drawing himself up, he threatens him with instant multiloquence. For I will enter into a great ocean of eulogies and remind you how music is always vaunted by the ancients and held for a holy thing. And in the opinion of many philosophers, the world itself is composed of music, and the heavens in their motion make harmony. And our very soul is formed of the same element, and moves and stirs and takes on life and virtue through music. He is launched. Rage makes him rhapsodic, and he marshals the ancients from Plato and Socrates with their metaphysical scales to Lycurgus and the Lacedaemoni bellicosissimi with their martial marches, and he appeals to the harmony of the spheres to manifest in the mystic sonority of music our one intimation of immortality, and he blasts the man who has no melody in him. Look, if he does not delight in it, for a dissonance in his soul, and banning him to a melomaniac's limbo, irredeemable by the lute, the viol, the flute, and the omnipotent organ, he confounds him forever with the proclamation of a world sustained everywhere and always by song. He is still brimming, still breathless with lyrical volubility when that accomplished musician, Giuliano de' Medici, agrees with him in behalf of the company unconditionally. But the smoldering soul of Canossa is now fully aroused. From one outlet it veers to another. From music, of which he knows much, he turns to art, of which he knows less. Truly, he exclaims, the man who does not value art seems to me far wide of wisdom. He apostrophizes the company with an injured expression, but no one challenges him. What Italian would deny his birthright? He is too elated, however, and he proceeds dithyrambically, likening the great machine of the world to a great and noble picture composed by the hand of nature and God, which deserves imitation and praise. And it is only when he has ransacked the ancients and appealed anew to the universe that he is winded. Society varies little, and the subject of art leads to the customary ineptitudes. A dismal discussion ensues on the relative merits of painting and sculpture. Canossa favors painting. The sculptor is present, Cristoforo Romano, but he is mute, and that contentious minx Emilia Pia has to stir him up. "And what do you think?" she asks him point blank. "Signora, I consider sculpture more exacting, of greater art and dignity than painting," he replies patiently. "Maybe," Canossa admits with his usual open-mindedness, "maybe, as statues are more durable, they may be said to be more impressive. As memorials, they serve their purpose better than painting, but painting is also long-lived, and while it lasts, it is much more delightful." The sculptor turns this categorical verdict tactfully, though the tact is adamant. "I think you maintain the contrary of what you believe, and all for the sake of our Raphael. Perhaps you consider his mastery of painting so supreme that the art of marble cannot match it, but consider that this is to praise the artist, not the art." And he proceeds to point out a few elementary facts, the titled amateur. The object of art being imitation, he invites Canossa to compare the superficial 2 dimensions of painting with the solid 3 of statuary. "You will not tell me that being is not nearer the truth than seeming." Then he carries the argument and the initiation one step further. The dignity of an art derives from its difficulty, and I consider sculpture more difficult because if an error is made, it cannot be corrected. Well, this is not true of painting. But Canossa is daunted. "I do not favor Raphael, and you must not think me so ignorant as not to recognize the mastery of Michelangelo and your own, and that of many other masters in marble, but I speak of art, not artists. And as you say, both are imitations of nature, yet it is not true that painting appears and sculpture is." Somewhat nettled at being misjudged again, he insists on the resources of chiaroscuro and perspective and color. And color, is that nothing? And the variety of subject matter and the lifelikeness of painting in proof of its superiority. But the sculptor, resigned to the futility of discussing art with musicians, merely stares at him stolidly, and he concludes hastily, "I do not think we should pursue this discussion further. All we need say is that the courtier should have some acquaintance with painting, since it is honorable and useful and was valued in those days when men were better than they are now." And by way of coda, he flings out a grace note. And if he gained no other pleasure or profit but to appreciate the excellence of ancient and modern statues, vases, buildings, medals, cameos, engravings, and the like, he would have learned to feel at the same time the beauty of living forms. And with that, just as he extricates himself, he stumbles on a fruitful idea. "See now," he exclaims, "what pleasure an acquaintance with painting can cause. And so say all who, when they admire beauty in a woman, delight in it so deeply that they seem translated, though they cannot paint. If they could, they would delight in it yet more, for they would appreciate more completely the perfection that gives them such pleasure." At this, Cesare Gonzaga laughs, and laughs gracelessly. "I am no painter," he says, "but I am sure I delight more in a woman when I see her than when she is painted, even though your peerless Apelles were to return to earth." "Error!" cries Canossa, "error! This pleasure does not derive from her beauty entirely, but from the affection you feel for her. Confess, when you first saw her, you felt not 1,000th part of the pleasure you knew later, yet her beauty was the same, which proves how much more your feeling stirs your appreciation than her beauty." And suddenly, he sees his own meaning. It is for this abstract ideal of pure and intrinsic beauty that he has been groping all along in defining the courtier. The whole discipline of his creation is dictated by a feeling for form and consonance. He is the complete man, symmetrically developed, purged of personal idiosyncrasy, and fitted for his social role by his versatility, sanity, and poise. Grace is his genius, conviviality his virtue, the normal his nature, he lives to please, to be persona grata is his glory, the pink of mediocrity, he is the model of all those primrose people whose common virtue is Raphael pinks it. But in explaining himself, he has exhausted himself. The company is drooping, the night is half gone, and the discussion, therefore, is adjourned until the following evening.
interesting stuff.
This is marvelous stuff. I've never read Castiglione.
That's his code, yeah. He was battling with Machiavelli and the Prince, you know.
Yeah.
He decided to pursue his own thing, leave Machiavelli to his own devices.
Now, what?
So that was an evening gathering of thoughtful people.
Yes.
Comparing notes.
Yeah.
It's like right on the verge of war, you know.
A civilized conversation.
Yeah, but they all, you know, had something to say, and you just didn't push the issue too far into the realm that you wanted to come from, you know. Let's get back to the Cordier. You're going too far off into the other thing. It had nothing to do with the game. And it continued until it got pretty touchy for a while between these powerful people.
Yeah.
Because basically they're together, you know, to actually consolidate their interests, which was Florence. And the Pope, and you know, the whole thing was trying to, you know, be unified so they could deal with the outside forces.
Now, is this book is this the original Castiglione, or is this this guy Ralph Roeder?
Ralph Roeder, he's the one who wrote this stuff.
He wrote this book.
He wrote this. He wrote that
That's a
book.
kind of synopsis of Castiglione.
Apparently, he got a chance to go down into the Vatican to go through all of the information. They're not allowed to do that anymore. This is information that was kept by the people who actually kept the records. They had a full entourage of people up there writing, keeping notes about everything that was going on. So he looked at these notes, and that's what he wrote from those notes. This is actual information now.
It's after 7. I got it.
Okay.
What are you doing this for?
I want to do readings of this. I have a reading. I got the thing getting ready to open up on the internet. So I'll have readings every Thursday. So I'm trying to figure out what best way to do this. And from hearing you read it, it seems to be best to do with a group of people taking on these
parts.
These parts.
We should get the original Castiglione because it's probably written in dialogue form, like Plato.
Want to do some research in that area? Great.
Yeah.
But this is another level, not philosophy, not anything. This is common debate.
Yeah.
These common debates don't take place anymore, and instead, given issues.
Yeah.
The debate took place to avoid the issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Well, that's marvelous language. Gee, that's gorgeous language.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.